Hey everyone, welcome to Cool Chess. Are you fed up with your position being bad after the first few steps and the beginning of your game being all about somehow surviving the opening? Don't worry, in this video with the help of Arjun Erigaisi, I'm going to show you how you can take control of the opening. You can see a model game that shows you how to force your opponents into a position where they don't feel comfortable. And we'll give you 10 great tips on how to get a good position from the opening. And of course, we'll also give you some opening recommendations. Okay, let's get started. We'll begin with the game of two Indian chess talents, Erigaisi and Praggnanandhaa. This was a very important rapid game played in 2022. Exceptionally, the key move of this game is the first move. White began with a move that 10-20 years ago was considered a very bad move, but interestingly, today even the top players play it. So the first move is knight to c3. But why was this developing move considered really bad for so many years? Because Black's natural response d5 not only takes control of the center, but also limits the possibilities of the knight on c3. Okay, let's see what Black played. e5? What? Didn't we just say that d5 is the most logical move here? That's totally right. But then why e5? The answer is an opening called the Jobava London system. If White plays d4 after d5, then we've arrived at the starting position of the Jobava London system. This opening has become very popular in recent years. I'll talk more about that later. Okay, but now let's go back to the game, where Black started with the move e5. What do you think Black was thinking here? I think it was like, I wish White would just play e4 so we could end up in some normal opening that I've played a lot. Well, that did not happen because White played knight to f3, which not only creates a unique position, but is also objectively a good move. Of course, Black didn't panic, and being a good chess player, he found the natural moves. Knight c6 was played. After that, White played d4. By opening up the position, White wants to put pressure on Black. After the exchange, Black continues to develop with the natural move knight f6. White continued his active play and developed his bishop from c1 to a good spot. After the move bishop g5, you could feel the tension in the position because of the pin. In those openings where the focus isn't on taking control of the center, but on active piece play, and the position opens up quickly, every single move is really important. That's why these kinds of positions can be really tricky for the less experienced player. Usually, after bishop g5, a safe move for Black is to play bishop e7. But in this somewhat rare position, bishop e7 is actually a losing move at a higher level, because knight f5 is really uncomfortable for Black. Of course, Black is a better player than to play bishop e7, so instead he developed his bishop to c5, and at the same time attacked the knight on d4. In positions like this, where speed is important, it's usually a good idea to develop with moves that force a response. Here, Black is forcing White to react to the attack on his knight. Besides bishop c5, bishop b4 is also a popular move. White defended the knight by playing e3, and Black responded with an inaccurate move. He played h6, which unnecessarily weakens his pawn shield. We're only at the sixth move, and the first mistake has already happened. How often does this happen when two top-level players are playing each other? Very rarely. And you know what's even rarer? When a mistake is followed by another one. White moved his bishop to h4, which makes a lot of sense. White wants to maintain the pin that's bothering Black. However, there would have been a better option here. After bishop takes f6, White's knights really come to life. If queen takes f6, then knight d5 comes, and then White can be annoying with knight b5. And even though Black is still holding on, White is clearly better thanks to their more active pieces and the space advantage. Two super talented players are playing, but look how early they're making little mistakes when they're in a position that's not standard for them. Alright, let's return to the game where White played bishop h4 as we said. Black castled and White responded with the key move, knight f5. Black played d5, which, besides aiming to control the center, also attacks the undefended knight on f5. However, White responded with a very strong move, queen f3. The queen defends the knight, is also eyeing the knight on f6, and makes room for a long castle. Things are looking dangerous for Black, so he has to play actively. By playing knight e5, he attacks the queen and moves the knight towards the king's side, where White's pieces are in the majority. However, White is a bit ahead of Black, and the mistake of the h6 pawn move now has consequences. Knight takes h6 follows. The knight can't be taken, because the knight on f6 would then be hanging, but the question is, where should we move the king? To h8 or to h7? Black made another mistake here. He moved his king to the h7 square. King h8 would have been more accurate, and although white would have kept the initiative in that case too, black would have had better chances to defend. White has to move his queen, but fortunately he has good spots for it. From f4, and then after bishop d6 also from g5, the queen can do what it needs to. It controls both the f6 and h6 squares, so the knight on h6 still can't be captured. Black played queen d7, trying to trap the knight on h6, but white has a solution for that too. If it can't escape to f5, it'll escape to g4. h3 was played. And now we really see the downside of the king moving to h7. Now black wants to play knight g6, but because he moved his king to the wrong place, white can now pin the knight on g6 by playing bishop d3. It's worth keeping in mind that it can often be bad if the king peeks out of its safe spot, like here on h7, because we can get into trouble from a pin or an unpleasant check. So, black decided to shut down the b1-h7 diagonal by playing knight e4. After the trade, white moved the knight back to g4 as he had planned, and now that black doesn't have to worry about the pin anymore, he finally played knight g6. And now what about the bishop? White found a clever way out. After queen h5 check, he moved the bishop to f6, which of course can't be taken because of knight takes f6 check, which wins the black queen. And here black made a huge blunder. He moved his queen to a4. Instead, he could have played queen f5, and white would have still had to work hard to make his pawn advantage count. Okay, and now it's your turn. Time for a 5-second challenge. White to move and win, the clock is ticking. And the winning move is knight h6 check. The point is that after g takes h6 and queen takes h6, the checkmate is unstoppable. And if black doesn't take on h6, then after a few knight checks, white takes on g6 and wins. So in this position, black resigned. Okay, and now let's see the top 10 tips on how to play the opening. For the first 2 tips, let's take a look at the diagram from our chess strategy videos. You can see that the choice of which opening to go for mainly depends on which chess strategy you feel most comfortable with. That's why the most important thing is to get to know yourself. The next tip, as you might expect, is to know your opponent if possible. It's very useful if you know their past games because you can vary your opening based on that. I'll tell you how in a moment. The next tip is about the importance of the right move order. Imagine you want to play the Jobava London system, and you check what openings your opponent usually plays. You see that against d4 the guy plays f5, the Dutch defense, and against e4 he plays e6. And the problem is that against the Dutch defense, the Jobava London setup is not really good. That's why you need to play with the move order a bit. We start with knight c3, to which your opponent will very likely play d5, since he doesn't play e5 or c5 against e4, so he is probably not very prepared for a possible e4 move. And what happens if our opponent plays f5 on the first move after knight c3? We're happy about that, because we play e4 in response and white has a great position. However, if your opponent plays d5 in response to d4 on the first move and c5 in response to e4, then we don't change things up. We can start with d4, and if he plays d5, we play knight c3. As you can see, changing up the move order is very helpful, but you need a little experience and preparation for it. You can also see from the previous tip how important it is to prepare for your opponents. That's why one opening isn't enough. It's much harder for your opponents to prepare if they can't be sure what you're going to play. Don't play for tricks. That's the next tip. It's really cool if you can surprise your opponent, but don't play stupid moves. Don't make a bad move just to try a trick. There are so many correct openings. Choose from them. The next tip is super important. No matter how prepared you are, you'll still get surprised in the opening sometimes. But in that case, don't panic. Think about the basic chess principles. And if you have the chance, go for the simpler and safer option. It's really useful if you don't always play the same setups. For example, don't develop your bishop to the wing with both white and black every time. Sometimes occupy the center, sometimes attack the center in a flexible way. Variety is important. If you play different kinds of positions, you won't get into trouble if you end up in a new position. You might have already seen the next 2 tips in our previous videos, but they're super important, so it's worth going over them again. The first one is, aim to be the one controlling the opening. Try to give your opponent as few options as possible. The second one is about how to learn the opening. Don't try to just memorize the moves. Always learn the plans, and that'll make it easier to remember the moves too. And the last tip is none other than patience. When you're learning a new opening, you might not have much success with it at the start. Don't let this get you down. You'll be more successful once you've gained some experience with it. So, be patient. Okay, here are the top 10 tips. Keep them in mind. And now, I'm going to recommend some openings that are worth giving a shot. These openings aren't necessarily the absolute best, but they are solid, correct openings. Their biggest advantage is that your opponent has relatively few variations to choose from. You're the player who decides the character of the position early on, so with these openings, you can achieve your goal of choosing the opening. We're planning to make a half-hour video about each of these openings, showing you the main ideas and the most important variations. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss them. Now we will focus on black openings, because playing the black pieces is probably a little bit more challenging for you. The first opening is the Scandinavian defense. This opening is perfectly playable below master level. It's true that white gets a tempo at the beginning by attacking the black queen, but in return we quickly attack the white center, and the active queen can cause a lot of trouble if white isn't well prepared. The next opening is the modern Philidor defense. This can be an excellent choice for players who enjoy positional chess, even at the master level. Thanks to the tricky move order, you don't need to learn as many openings as if you immediately played e5 in response to e4. And don't worry about trading queens. The position is still a long way from a draw with so many pieces still on the board. Interestingly, according to the stats, black is more successful than white in this line where queens are exchanged. The next opening is the modern defense. It's really flexible, not many pieces get traded early on, and it leads to complex positions where usually the stronger and more experienced player wins. Okay, let's move on to d4 openings. The first one is the Benko Gambit. The plan is super simple. With a positional pawn sacrifice, we open up the queen side, where we put huge pressure on white. The great thing about this opening is that you don't have to memorize many variations. You can play by intuition. For black, the last suggestion is the Dutch defense. Solid opening with real chances to win, and a huge advantage is that you are the one dictating how the game goes from the very first move. Okay, and finally, let's briefly talk about the Jobava London system, since I've mentioned it several times. So this time, we'll look at the opening from white's side. Many of you might know the classic London system, which is quite popular because it's really easy to play, and it's a very solid system. The Jobava London is similar, but it has more active piece play. White's pieces control the dark squares really well, giving white a very solid center. The knight on c3 is in a slightly weird spot, but for black, the knight b5 threat can sometimes be very annoying. The computer, of course, says it's equal, but for a human player, it's usually easier to play with white. Alright, that's all for openings today, but we'll be talking about them a lot more in the future, so make sure you subscribe. I hope you liked it. See you in our next video.